Nathan Sterling had everything money could buy, but when he discovers his pregnant ex-wife Maya working as a waitress at his favorite restaurant, his perfectly constructed world begins to crumble. A story of lost love, second chances, and a grandfather clock that witnessed their journey from heartbreak to healing. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe to never miss our latest stories and let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. Nathan Sterling adjusted his expensive tie as he walked into La Maison, the most exclusive restaurant in town. The maître d' immediately recognized him. After all, Nathan owned half the buildings in the downtown area. "Your usual table, Mr. Sterling?" the man asked with a practiced smile. "Yes, and make sure there's a bottle of the 82 Bordeaux waiting. My date will be here shortly," Nathan replied, checking his Rolex. Victoria was always fashionably late, something that used to annoy him but now seemed charming. Everything about Victoria was calculated to charm. The restaurant buzzed with the quiet conversation of the wealthy and powerful. This was Nathan's world now, a world of perfectly pressed suits, million-dollar deals, and people who understood the importance of appearances. At 42, he had everything he'd ever wanted: success, respect, and a beautiful woman who fit perfectly into his lifestyle. Victoria arrived 15 minutes later, turning heads in her red designer dress. She air-kissed Nathan's cheek, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "Sorry I'm late, darling. The board meeting ran over, and you know how these things are." Nathan did know. It was one of the reasons they worked so well together. Victoria was the CEO of a public relations firm, and she understood the demands of his position. Unlike Maya, who had always... He stopped that thought before it could fully form. He didn't think about Maya anymore. That chapter of his life was closed. "You look beautiful," he said instead, pouring Victoria a glass of wine. She smiled, perfectly white teeth gleaming in the candlelight. "The merger's going through," Victoria announced, taking a delicate sip. "Thompson Industries agreed to all our terms. We should celebrate." Nathan was about to reply when movement at the far end of the restaurant caught his eye. A waitress was carefully maneuvering between tables, her black uniform stretched tight across a very pregnant belly. There was something familiar about the way she moved, the gentle grace even as she balanced a heavy tray. The waitress turned and Nathan's world stopped. Maya. She looked different from the last time he'd seen her. Her long dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and there were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before. But what drew his attention was her stomach, round and full, clearly at least 7 months along. 7 months. The numbers started adding up in Nathan's head before he could stop them. 7 months ago, he had still been married to Maya. 7 months ago, right before everything fell apart. "Nathan, are you listening?" Victoria's voice cut through his thoughts. She followed his gaze, her perfectly shaped eyebrows drawing together. "Is something wrong?" "No," he said quickly, too quickly. "Nothing's wrong. Tell me more about the merger." But he couldn't focus on Victoria's words. His eyes kept drifting to Maya as she moved through the restaurant. She hadn't seen him yet, and he found himself holding his breath every time she came near their section. How had she ended up here? The last he'd heard, through their mutual friends, who had mostly taken his side after the divorce, Maya had moved to the other side of town. He'd made sure she got a decent settlement, enough to live comfortably though not extravagantly. So why was she waiting tables? And the baby? God, the baby! Could it be his? They hadn't talked in months. After the final fight, when he'd walked out, Maya had tried to call him several times, but he'd been angry, hurt, convinced that their marriage had been holding him back. His assistant had been instructed to screen her calls, and eventually they'd stopped coming. Had she been trying to tell him about the baby? "I think I see the Andersons," Victoria said, waving to someone across the room. "We should stop by. Their table before we leave. They're potential investors in the new development project." Nathan nodded automatically, his mind racing. He should leave. He should pay the bill right now, escort Victoria out, and pretend he never saw Maya. He had a new life now, a better life, the kind of life he'd always wanted. But then Maya turned again, and this time their eyes met. The tray she was carrying trembled slightly, but she didn't drop it. Her face went pale, then flushed, but she kept moving, professional mask firmly in place. It was only her eyes that gave her away, those deep brown eyes that had once looked at him with so much love, now filled with a mixture of pain, pride, and something else he couldn't quite read. She knew he'd seen her condition, and she was choosing to ignore him completely. "Nathan," Victoria's sharp tone finally broke through. "What is wrong with you tonight? You've barely said 2 words. "I'm sorry," he said, forcing himself to look at his girlfriend. "I just remembered something about the Thompson deal that needs attention. Why don't we get the check?" Victoria pouted but agreed. As Nathan signaled for the bill, he noticed Maya disappearing through the kitchen doors. His chest felt tight, like he couldn't get enough air. A different server brought their check, a young man who efficiently processed Nathan's credit card and wished them a good evening. Nathan left a generous tip, trying not to think about Maya carrying heavy trays for hours, trying to earn enough to support herself and his child. The thought hit him like a physical blow. If the baby was his, and the timing suggested it was, then Maya was out there working a physically demanding job while carrying his child. While he sat in expensive restaurants, drinking $1,000 wine and planning real estate developments. "Let's go, darling," Victoria said, standing and gathering her designer clutch. "The Andersons are leaving. We can catch them in the parking lot." Nathan stood mechanically, his mind still in chaos. As Victoria led the way through the restaurant, chattering about the Andersons and their investment portfolio, he glanced one last time toward the kitchen doors. Maya stepped out just then, a fresh tray balanced carefully in her hands. She didn't look his way, but he saw how tired she looked, how her free hand occasionally moved to support her lower back. He had done this. He had left her alone to deal with this, and somehow seeing her here, in his world but so far removed from his current lifestyle, made everything he'd convinced himself about their divorce seem hollow. As he followed Victoria out into the warm evening air, Nathan knew with crushing certainty that his carefully constructed new life had just developed a crack in its foundation. And through that crack, all the feelings and responsibilities he'd tried to leave behind were starting to seep back in. Nathan couldn't sleep that night. He tossed and turned in his king-sized bed, Maya's face haunting his thoughts. The television in his bedroom played quietly, some late-night business news about his company's latest acquisition, but he wasn't listening. All he could think about was Maya, pregnant, and waiting tables. His phone buzzed. Another text. From Victoria. "You seem distracted tonight. Everything okay?" He didn't answer. Instead, he got up and walked to his home office. The house felt too big, too empty. He'd bought it after the divorce, a modern mansion that screamed success. Maya would have hated it. She always said big houses felt lonely. Sitting at his desk, Nathan opened his laptop and did something he hadn't done in months. He looked up Maya's contact information. Her number was still the same. He'd never deleted it, just buried it in his contacts list. His finger hovered over the call button. What would he even say? "Sorry, I ignored your calls. Is that my baby you're carrying?" The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight. Nathan remembered how Maya used to love that sound. They'd had a similar clock in their old house, a wedding gift from his parents. He wondered what had happened to it after the divorce. "Mr. Sterling?" His housekeeping service had arrived for their nightly cleaning. "Would you like your evening tea?" "No, thank you, Mrs. Chen. You can go home early tonight." After she left, Nathan found himself walking to his private bar. He poured himself a scotch, then set it down without drinking. Maya's words from their last fight echoed in his head. "You solve everything with work or alcohol, Nathan. When are you going to solve things with your heart?" He'd been so angry when she said that. How dare she criticize him when he worked so hard to give them a good life? But now, standing in his expensive house, surrounded by all the things money could buy, her words hit differently. The next morning, Nathan arrived at his office earlier than usual. His assistant, Karen, looked surprised to see him. "Mr. Sterling, you're early. Shall I get your coffee?" "No, Karen. I need you to pull all my phone records from 7 months. Yes, and my old emails too." Karen's efficiency was one of the reasons he paid her so well. Within an hour, she had everything organized on his desk. Nathan started going through them, his heart sinking with each ignored call from Maya, each blocked email. There it was. 7 months ago, Maya had tried to reach him 12 times in 1 week. The last email she sent had a subject line that made his hands shake. "Important news about our future." He'd never opened it. He'd been too busy with the Thompson merger, too caught up in his new relationship with Victoria, too convinced that anything Maya had to say would just be another attempt to make him feel guilty about the divorce. The email was still there, unopened. Nathan clicked on it, his mouth dry. "Nathan, I know you don't want to hear from me. I understand that you've moved on. But this isn't about us anymore. I'm pregnant. The doctor confirmed it yesterday. It's yours. You know I've never been with anyone else. I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you had the right to know you're going to be a father. Maya. Nathan closed his laptop so hard it might have cracked. He'd ignored this. He'd been so wrapped up in his own world that he'd ignored something this important. His phone rang. It was Victoria. Darling, I've arranged lunch with the Thompsons today. They want to discuss the merger details. Cancel it, Nathan said. What, Nathan? This is important. We've been working on this deal for months. Cancel everything today. I have something I need to do. He hung up before Victoria could argue. For the first time in years, business wasn't the most important thing on his mind. Nathan drove to La Maison, arriving just as they were opening for lunch. The same maitre d' from last night looked surprised to see him. Mr. Sterling? Your usual. Table? No, I need to know when Maya Anderson works. The maitre d' hesitated. Sir, I can't give out employee information. Nathan pulled out his wallet and placed several $100 bills on the podium. The maitre d' glanced around before pocketing them. She works lunch shifts, Tuesday through Saturday, and Sunday dinner service. Nathan checked his watch. It was Tuesday. If he waited, he'd see her soon. But what would he say? How could he explain ignoring her news, leaving her to handle everything alone? He sat at the bar, ordering only water. An hour passed. The lunch crowd started arriving. Business people in suits, ladies who lunched, the usual clientele of one of the city's most expensive restaurants. Then he saw her. Maya came in through the employee entrance, tying her apron around her pregnant belly. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept well either. Before he could think too much about it, Nathan stood up and walked toward her. Maya saw him coming and her whole body tensed. We need to talk, he said quietly. I'm working, Maya replied, not meeting his eyes. I saw your email, the one from 7 months ago. Maya's hand went protectively to her stomach. Now you want to talk after 7 months of silence? Please, Maya, 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking for. She glanced at the clock, then at her manager, who was watching them curiously. I have a break in 3 hours. If you want to talk, you can wait. Nathan nodded. I'll wait. And he did. He sat at the bar for 3 hours watching Maya work. She moved more slowly than the other servers, but she never complained. He saw how the other staff helped her with heavy trays, how regular customers asked about her pregnancy with genuine concern. Maya had built a life here, he realized. A hard life, maybe, but one with people who cared about her. While he'd been climbing the corporate ladder and dating socialites, she'd been creating a community that supported her through one of the hardest times of her life. Finally, Maya's break came. She walked past him toward the employee break room, and he followed. Inside, she sat heavily in a chair, rubbing her lower back. You have 5 minutes, she said. Nathan had rehearsed this moment in his head for the past 3 hours, but now that it was here, all his prepared words felt inadequate. I'm sorry, he said simply. I'm sorry I didn't read your email. I'm sorry I ignored your calls. I'm sorry I left you to deal with this alone. Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. Is that all? No, I want to help. Whatever you need, money, a better job, a house. Stop. Maya's voice was firm. I don't need your money, Nathan. I needed you 7 months ago when I found out I was carrying your child. I needed you 6 months ago when I couldn't stop throwing up and lost my job at the advertising firm. I needed you 5 months ago when I had to move to a cheaper apartment because I couldn't afford the old one on a waitress's salary. Each word hit Nathan like a slap. He'd been living in luxury while she struggled through morning sickness alone, while she lost her career, while she was forced to downsize her life to survive. I want to make it right, he said. Maya stood up, one hand supporting her back. Make it right? You can't make this right, Nathan. You can't just throw money at 7 months of abandonment and expect everything to be okay. That's always been your problem, thinking money can solve everything. Then tell me what to do, Nathan pleaded. Tell me how to fix this. Maya looked at him for a long moment, and he saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the hurt, but also a strength he'd never fully appreciated before. I have to get back to work, she said finally. My break's over. Maya, please, if you really want to make things right, she said, pausing at the door, start by proving you can be reliable, that you can show up when you say you will, that you can think about someone other than yourself. She left him standing there in the break room, surrounded by lockers and the smell of restaurant food. Nathan felt something he hadn't felt in years, completely and utterly lost. Victoria was waiting in Nathan's office when he returned from La Maison. She sat in his leather chair, her perfect manicure tapping impatiently on his desk. "Would you like to explain why you cancelled lunch with the Thompsons?" she demanded. "Do you know how hard it was to get them to agree to meet?" Nathan walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline he'd helped build. His buildings stood tall and proud, but right now they felt like monuments to his selfishness. "My ex-wife is pregnant," he said quietly, "with my child." The tapping stopped. The silence in the room was deafening. "What?" Victoria's voice was sharp as glass. "What do you mean your ex-wife is pregnant?" "I saw her last night at La Maison. She's 7 months along. She tried to tell me, but I never read her messages." Victoria stood up, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor as she walked around the desk. "Nathan, darling, you can't be serious. She's probably just trying to get money from you. You know how these things work." Nathan turned to face her, suddenly seeing Victoria clearly for the first time. Her perfectly calculated appearance, her strategic social connections, her constant focus on status and money. She was everything he'd thought he wanted, everything that had led him to abandon Maya. "No," he said firmly, "Maya's not like that. She's working as a waitress, Victoria. If she wanted money, she would have taken me to court months ago." Victoria's face hardened. "So what are you going to do? Play happy families with a waitress? Think about your image, Nathan. Think about what this could do to the Thompson deal." "I don't care about the Thompson deal." "You don't mean that." Victoria reached for his arm, but he stepped away. "You've worked too hard to build your reputation." "We've worked too hard. You can't throw it all away for some pregnant waitress." "That pregnant waitress is carrying my child." Nathan's voice rose. "And she's not just a waitress. She's Maya, the woman I was married to for 8 years. The woman I abandoned when she needed me most." Victoria picked up her designer bag, her movements sharp and angry. "I can see you're not thinking clearly right now. Call me when you come to your senses." She stormed out, leaving behind the scent of her expensive perfume. Nathan didn't try to stop her. Instead, he called Karen into his office. "Cancel all my appointments for the next week," he said, "and get me everything you can find about pregnancy. Books, websites, whatever. I need to know what happens at 7 months." Karen, ever professional, didn't show any surprise. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Would you like me to include information about prenatal care and delivery as well?" "Everything," Nathan said. "And Karen, find out what happened to Maya's job at Anderson Advertising. She mentioned losing it during morning sickness." Over the next few days, Nathan immersed himself in pregnancy research. He learned about the development of the baby, the challenges of the 3rd trimester, the importance of proper nutrition and rest. Every piece of information made him more aware of what Maya was going through while working those long shifts at the restaurant. He also discovered what happened at Anderson Advertising. Maya had been a rising star in their creative department, but her severe morning sickness had led to too many missed days. They'd let her go, legally, but not ethically. The fact that they shared his last name made it even worse. Nathan went back to La Maison every day during Maya's shifts. He didn't approach her, didn't try to force another conversation. Instead, he sat at the bar, drinking water, and watched. He saw how she never took full breaks, how she shared her tips with the busboys who helped her with heavy trays, how she kept smiling despite her obvious fatigue. On her 3rd straight day of working, Nathan saw Maya stumble slightly while carrying plates. Without thinking, he stood up, ready to rush to her aid. But before he could move, another server was there steadying her. "Maya, honey, you need to rest," he heard the older woman say. "You've been on your feet too long." "I'm fine, Betty," Maya insisted. "I need the hours." That night, Nathan couldn't sleep again. He kept seeing Maya stumbling, imagining what could have happened. At 3 in the morning, he made a decision. The next day, he arrived at La Maison before Maya's shift. He asked to speak to the manager, Mr. Peterson. "Mr. Sterling," Peterson said nervously. "Is there a problem with the service?" "No, I want to talk about Maya Anderson." Peterson's nervousness increased. "She's one of our best servers despite her condition, very reliable." "I want to pay her salary," Nathan said. "Full wages plus tips, but I want her off the floor, no more carrying trays, no more long hours on her feet." Peterson blinked. "Sir, I don't understand." "She's carrying my child," Nathan said quietly. "But she won't accept help directly from me. So I'm asking you to help. Create a hostess position for her. Something that lets her sit down, take breaks when she needs them. I'll cover any costs." Peterson was quiet for a moment. "With all due respect, Mr. Sterling, Maya's very proud. She'll know something's up if we suddenly create a position for her." Then be creative, Nathan insisted. Tell her you need someone to handle VIP reservations. Tell her you're expanding the front of house. Tell her whatever you need to, but get her off her feet. When Maya arrived for her shift, Nathan watched from his usual spot as Peterson called her into his office. Through the glass walls, he could see her surprised expression, then her suspicion. She glanced toward the bar, her eyes finding him immediately. Maya walked out of Peterson's office and straight to Nathan. "Did you do this?" she demanded. "Do what?" "Don't play innocent. Peterson just offered me a hostess position. Said they need someone to handle VIP clients, someone who knows the regulars. Said it comes with full benefits and better pay." Her eyes narrowed. "This has you written all over it." Nathan met her gaze steadily. "You told me to prove I could be reliable, to show I can think about someone besides myself. That's what I'm trying to do, by interfering with my job, by making sure you and our baby are safe." Nathan's voice softened. "I saw you stumble yesterday, Maya. I saw how tired you are. Please, just let me do this one thing." Maya's hand went to her stomach, a gesture Nathan had noticed she made when she was uncertain. "I don't want your money, Nathan. It's not about money, it's about our child, and it's about you." He took a deep breath. "You were right. I have always tried to solve everything with money. But this time, the money isn't the solution. It's just a tool to keep you both safe while I work on the real solution." "And what's that?" "Becoming someone worthy of being in your life again, someone worthy of being a father." Nathan stood up. "Take the hostess job, Maya. Not for me, but for yourself, for our baby. And if you decide you never want to speak to me again, I'll understand. But at least I'll know you're both okay." Maya was quiet for a long moment, one hand still resting on her stomach. Finally, she spoke. "The grandfather clock. From our old house, what happened to it?" The question caught Nathan off guard. I have it. It's in storage. I couldn't sell it." A flicker of something, maybe surprise, maybe hope, crossed Maya's face. "You kept it." "I kept everything that mattered to you," Nathan admitted. "I just didn't realize at the time that you mattered most of all." Maya brushed away a tear that had escaped despite her efforts. "I'll take the hostess job," she said quietly. "But not because you want me to, because I need to think about what's best for this baby." She turned to walk away, then paused. "The baby kicks a lot in the evening, especially when it's quiet. Just thought you should know that." Nathan watched her walk back to Peterson's office, his heart pounding. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't even close, but it was something. A tiny crack in the wall between them, letting in just enough light to see by. He pulled out his phone and cancelled his dinner plans with Victoria. Then he called his contractor. "Remember that renovation we planned for my home office? Change of plans. I want you to turn it into a nursery instead." 2 weeks had passed since Maya started her new position as hostess. Nathan kept his distance, watching from afar as she settled into the role. She looked better, less tired, more like the Maya he remembered. But just as things seemed to be improving, life threw another curveball their way. Victoria showed up at La Maison during Maya's shift, dressed to kill in a red designer suit. "Nathan's making a mistake," Victoria announced, cornering Maya at the hostess station, "and I'm here to fix it." Maya kept her professional smile firmly in place. "I'm sorry, do you have a reservation?" "Don't play cute with me." Victoria's voice was low but sharp. "I know what you're doing. Getting pregnant, showing up at Nathan's favorite restaurant, playing the poor struggling mother-to-be. It's clever, I'll give you that." Other customers were starting to notice the tension. Maya forced her voice to stay calm. "If you don't have a reservation, I'm afraid you'll have to leave." Victoria pulled out her checkbook. "How much? Name your price to disappear. To give up any claim on Nathan and his money." Maya's hands started shaking, but she kept them folded on the desk. "I haven't made any claims on Nathan or his money. Now please leave before I call security." $1 million, Victoria said, writing the check. "That's more than you'd make in 20 years waiting tables. Take it and go, give the baby up for adoption. Everyone wins." Maya felt the baby kick hard, as if protesting Victoria's words. "Get out." $2 million then. Final offer. Victoria ripped out the check and held it out. "Think about it. You could give this baby a fresh start and Nathan can keep the life he's built, the life he chose when he left you. Is there a problem here?" Nathan's voice cut through the tension. He'd arrived for his usual lunch and walked in on the scene. His face went from concern to furious as he saw the checkbook in Victoria's hand. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Victoria turned, all elegant poise again. "Solving your problem, darling. Like I always do. The only problem here is you." Nathan's voice was cold. "Maya, are you okay?" Maya nodded, though her face was pale. "I'm fine, just feeling a little..." She swayed slightly. Nathan was at her side in an instant, supporting her elbow. "You need to sit down." "I'm okay," Maya insisted, but her voice was weak. "Just got dizzy for a moment." "Call an ambulance." Nathan ordered one of the other staff members. Then to Victoria. "Get out, we're done. Whatever was between us, it's over." Victoria's perfect composure cracked. "You're throwing everything away for her? For a baby that might not even be yours?" "Security," Nathan called. Two large men appeared immediately. "Please escort Ms. Reynolds out and make sure she knows. She's no longer welcome here." As security led Victoria away, Maya's knees buckled. Nathan caught her, easing her into a chair. "I've been having pains," she admitted quietly, "all morning. I thought they'd pass." Nathan felt cold fear grip his heart. "Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you go home?" "I can't afford to miss work." Maya winced, holding her stomach. "The medical bills are already..." "Forget the bills," Nathan said fiercely. "Nothing matters except you and the baby being okay." The ambulance arrived quickly. As the paramedics helped Maya onto the stretcher, she grabbed Nathan's hand. "Don't leave," she whispered. "Never again," he promised. The ride to the hospital was tense. Maya's blood pressure was high and she was showing signs of early labor. Nathan held her hand the whole way, remembering all the pregnancy complications he'd read about in his research. In the emergency room, Dr. Sarah Chen took charge. "Mrs. Anderson, you're experiencing preeclampsia. We need to get your blood pressure down immediately." "It's too early," Maya said, scared. "The baby..." "We'll do everything we can," Dr. Chen assured her. She turned to Nathan. "Are you the father?" "Yes," Nathan said firmly, before Maya could respond. "What do you need from me?" "Medical history, insurance information..." Dr. Chen started listing things. "Done. Whatever she needs, whatever it costs, I'm handling it." Nathan squeezed Maya's hand. "Just focus on keeping them both safe." The next few hours were a blur of tests, medications, and worried consultations. Maya was moved to a private room in the maternity ward, hooked up to monitors that beeped steadily, tracking both her and the baby's vital signs. Nathan never left her side. He called Karen and had her cancel everything on his calendar indefinitely. He called his lawyer and had him start drafting papers to provide for the baby. He even called Peterson at La Maison and arranged for Maya's job to be held for her as long as needed. Around midnight, Maya's blood pressure finally stabilized. The contractions had stopped, but Dr. Chen ordered complete bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. "You'll need constant care," the doctor explained. "Someone to help with everything. Any stress or physical exertion could trigger early labor again." Maya's face fell. "I live alone, and I can't afford a nurse." "You're coming home with me," Nathan said. Maya started to protest, but Nathan cut her off. "My house has an elevator. The nursery is already set up. I have staff who can help, and I can work from home." He took her hand again. "Please, Maya, let me do this. Not for me, not even for you, but for our baby." Maya looked at their joined hands. "The grandfather clock," she said suddenly. "Is it still in storage?" Nathan understood what she wasn't saying. She wanted something familiar, something from their shared past to make this feel less strange. "I'll have it delivered tomorrow," he promised. "Put it right in the living room where you can hear it chime." Maya was quiet for a long moment, one hand resting on her stomach while the other remained in Nathan's grip. Finally, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly, "but just until the baby comes. And I want a written agreement that this doesn't affect any future custody arrangements." Nathan felt his heart crack a little at her caution, but he understood it. He'd earned her distrust. "I'll have my lawyer draw up whatever paperwork you want. Right now, I just want you both safe." Dr. Chen smiled. "I'll start the discharge paperwork for tomorrow morning. Mrs. Anderson, remember, complete bed rest. No exceptions." After the doctor left, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Maya looked small in the hospital bed, vulnerable in a way that made Nathan's chest ache. "I'm sorry about Victoria," he said finally. "I had no idea she would..." "You really didn't send her?" Maya's voice was tired but curious. "God, no, I ended things with her weeks ago, right after I found out about the baby." Maya's free hand moved in slow circles over her stomach. "She offered me $2 million to disappear, to give up the baby for adoption." Nathan felt sick. "Maya, I swear..." I know, she interrupted. I could see how angry you were when you heard her. The old Nathan, the Nathan from the end of our marriage, he would have tried to smooth things over, to keep everyone happy. But you didn't. I'm not that man anymore, Nathan said quietly. Or at least I'm trying not to be. The baby chose that moment. To kick, strong enough that Nathan could feel it through their joined hands. Maya gave a small, tired laugh. Someone's got an opinion about that. Nathan smiled, his throat tight with emotion. It was the first time he'd felt his child move. Get some rest, he said, reluctantly letting go of her hand. I'll be right here in this chair if you need anything. Maya's eyes were already closing, the medications and stress taking their toll. Nathan. Yes? The clock. Make sure they set it up where I can see it too, not just hear it. I will, he promised. As Maya drifted off to sleep, Nathan sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair, listening to the steady beep of the monitors. Outside the window, the city lights twinkled like stars, but for the first time in years, Nathan wasn't thinking about business deals or social status or public image. He was thinking about the grandfather clock that had marked the hours of their marriage, about to take its place in their new beginning. He was thinking about Maya's strength, her dignity in the face of Victoria's cruel offer. Most of all, he was thinking about that kick he'd felt, his child, strong and real and already fighting to be heard. The night stretched on, but Nathan didn't sleep. He had too much to plan, too much to make right. And for once in his life, none of it had anything to do with money. Moving Maya into Nathan's house was like trying to blend oil and water. The modern mansion, with its sleek furniture and cold marble floors, seemed to reject the warmth she naturally brought with her. Nathan had arranged for her to have the main suite on the first floor, making sure she wouldn't have to deal with stairs. The grandfather clock, restored to perfect condition, stood in the living room, its steady ticking a constant reminder of their shared past. The doctor said complete bed rest, Nathan reminded Maya for the third time that morning, watching her try to make her own breakfast. That's why we have Mrs. Chen. I'm not an invalid, Maya protested, but her hand was pressed against her lower back, betraying her discomfort. I can make my own toast. Please, Nathan said softly. Let us help you. For the baby. It was the magic word. For the baby. Maya sighed and let Mrs. Chen guide her back to the comfortable recliner in the living room, positioned perfectly to see both the grandfather clock and the garden through the large windows. Nathan had transformed his home office into a cozy sitting room, moving all his work equipment upstairs. The walls, once covered in business awards and financial charts, now held peaceful nature photographs. He'd remembered how much Maya loved the outdoors, even if she couldn't enjoy it right now. The nursery is ready whenever you want to see it, Nathan said carefully, watching Maya adjust her position in the chair. No pressure, just whenever you feel up to it. Maya nodded, but didn't respond. She'd been quiet since they left the hospital, speaking only when necessary. Nathan couldn't blame her. This wasn't how either of them had imagined things would turn out. The doorbell rang, making them both jump. Mrs. Chen hurried to answer it. Mr. Sterling, she called. It's Ms. Reynolds. Nathan felt Maya tense beside him. I'll handle this, he said, heading for the door. Victoria stood on the doorstep, looking less polished than usual. Her eyes were red, her designer outfit slightly wrinkled. Nathan, please, we need to talk. No, we don't, Nathan started to close the door, but Victoria put her foot in the way. The Thompson deal is falling apart, she said desperately. They're backing out because of the rumors about you and her. She glanced past Nathan, trying to see into the house. Your reputation is taking a hit. People are talking. Let them talk. Nathan's voice was firm. I told you before, we're done. Think about what you're throwing away. Victoria's voice rose. Everything you've worked for, everything we planned, is worth nothing compared to what I already threw away once. Nathan pushed her foot back and closed the door firmly. When he turned around, he found Maya watching him. The Thompson deal, she said quietly. That was worth millions, wasn't it? Nathan walked back to her. It doesn't matter. It used to matter. It used to be all that mattered. I was wrong. Nathan sat in the chair opposite her. I've been wrong about a lot of things. The grandfather clock chimed. 10, its familiar sound filling the room. Maya's hand moved to her stomach. A gesture Nathan had come to recognize meant the baby was moving. Active this morning? He asked. Very. Maya hesitated, then added, Would you like to feel? Nathan's heart skipped a beat. Are you sure? Maya nodded. Nathan moved closer, and she took his hand. placing it on the side of her stomach. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he felt it, a strong kick against his palm. "That's amazing," he whispered. "She does that a lot now," Maya said, then froze, realizing what she'd revealed. "She?" Nathan's voice cracked. "It's a girl." Maya nodded slowly. "I found out at my last appointment. I was going to tell you, but then everything happened with Victoria and the hospital." "A daughter," Nathan said softly, his hand still on Maya's stomach. "We're having a daughter." The moment was interrupted by Mrs. Chen. "Mrs. Anderson, the doctor is here for your checkup." Dr. Chen came in carrying her medical bag. "How are you feeling today, Maya?" "Tired of sitting around," Maya admitted, "but the pain hasn't come back." The doctor checked Maya's blood pressure, listened to the baby's heartbeat, and performed other routine tests. Nathan hovered nearby, paying close attention to everything. "Blood pressure is still higher than I'd like," Dr. Chen said finally. "Though you need to stay on bed rest. Any stress could trigger early labor again." "I've been trying to keep her from doing too much," Nathan said. Dr. Chen smiled. "Good. That's exactly what she needs right now." She turned to Maya. "I know it's frustrating, but think of it as your job right now. Growing this baby and keeping her safe is the most important work you can do." After the doctor left, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. The grandfather clock ticked steadily in the background. "Nathan," Maya's voice was hesitant. I think I'd like to see the nursery now." Nathan tried to contain his excitement. "Are you sure? We can wait if you're not ready." "I'm sure." He helped her up carefully, supporting her as they walked down the hall. At the nursery door he paused. "Close your eyes." Maya gave him a look, but complied. Nathan opened the door and guided her inside. "Okay," he said. "Open them." Maya's gasp made his heart swell. The room was everything he'd remembered her dreaming about during their marriage. Soft yellow walls with hand-painted butterflies, a white crib with delicate lace bedding, a rocking chair by the window, overlooking the garden. And in the corner, a small shelf filled with children's books, the same books Maya had mentioned wanting to read to their future children years ago. "You remembered," she whispered, touching one of the butterflies on the wall. "I remembered everything," Nathan said quietly. "I just forgot what was important for a while." Maya turned to face him, tears in her eyes. "Why did you keep the clock, really?" Nathan was caught off guard by the question, but he answered honestly. "Because every time it chimed, it reminded me of you, of Sunday mornings when you'd make pancakes and we'd listen to it strike 9, of Christmas Eves when we'd stay up until midnight counting the chimes together." He swallowed hard. "Even when I was trying to forget you, I couldn't let it go." "I missed that sound," Maya admitted. "In my apartment, everything was so quiet." "Maya," Nathan took a deep breath, "I know this isn't how either of us planned things. And I know you're only here because of the baby and the doctor's orders. But I want you to know, having you here, hearing that clock chime again, feeling our daughter kick, it's making me realize how empty everything was without you." Maya's hand went to her stomach again. "Nathan, I can't. I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know that. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. I'll prove it to you day by day that I can be the man you deserved all along." The grandfather clock chimed 11, its sound reaching them even in the nursery. Maya smiled slightly. "Day by day," she repeated softly. "That's all any of us can do, isn't it?" Nathan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Outside the window, a butterfly landed on a flower in the garden, its wings catching the sunlight. Maybe. Nathan thought it was a sign. Like the butterfly, they had a chance to transform something old into something new and beautiful. But for now, he would focus on today, on keeping Maya and their daughter safe, on proving one tick of the grandfather clock at a time that some things were worth more than all the business deals in the world. 3 weeks had passed since Maya moved in, and the tension in the house had slowly begun to ease. The grandfather clock's steady ticking became a comforting backdrop to their careful coexistence. But peace never lasts long in life, as they were about to discover. "Nathan?" Mrs. Chen called from the front door. "Your mother is here." Maya, who had been reading in her usual spot by the window, went pale. Eleanor Sterling had never approved of her son's marriage to a common girl from a middle-class family. The last time they'd spoken, Eleanor had suggested that Maya's failure to provide an heir was reason enough for divorce. Nathan rushed down the stairs, but it was too late. Eleanor Sterling swept into the living room like a queen entering her court, her silver hair perfectly styled and her designer suit immaculate. Really, Nathan, she said, ignoring Maya completely. I had to hear about all this from Victoria? About your ex-wife's condition? Mother, Nathan's voice held a warning. Now isn't a good time. Eleanor's eyes finally landed on Maya, taking in her pregnant form with barely concealed disdain. I suppose you think this changes everything? That a baby will magically fix what was broken? Mrs. Sterling, Maya said quietly, one hand protectively over her stomach. I didn't ask Nathan for anything. I'm only here because of medical complications. Of course you didn't ask. Eleanor's smile was sharp as a knife. You just made sure. He found out about your condition in the most public way possible. At his favorite restaurant, wasn't it? How very theatrical. That's enough. Nathan moved to stand between his mother and Maya. You don't know anything about what's happening here. I know you're throwing away everything you've built. The Thompson deal is dead. Your company's stock is dropping, all because you couldn't handle this situation discreetly. Maya tried to stand, but Nathan was at her side instantly. Don't. The doctor said. I should go to my room, Maya said, her voice shaking. This is a family matter. You're carrying my grandchild, Eleanor said coldly. That makes it very much a family matter. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Nathan helped Maya sit back down. We're not going to do anything about it, Mother. Maya and I are handling this. Our way. Your way? Eleanor laughed. Your way is destroying everything your father and I built. The Sterling name means something in this city. Or it did, until you started playing house with your pregnant ex-wife. The grandfather clock struck 3, its chimes seeming louder than usual in the tense room. Maya's hand tightened on her stomach. Nathan, she whispered, something's wrong. Nathan's heart stopped. What is it? The pain again? Maya nodded, her face contorted. Worse than before. Mrs. Chen, Nathan called. Call Dr. Chen now. Eleanor watched the scene unfold with growing alarm. Nathan, be reasonable. There are private clinics that handle these situations discreetly. Get out. Nathan's voice was deadly quiet. Get out of my house, and don't come back until you can accept that Maya and this baby are my family now. I am your family, Eleanor protested. Everything I've done has been for you. No, Nathan said, holding Maya's hand as she breathed through the pain. Everything you've done has been for the Sterling name, for appearances, for money. I'm done with all of it. Dr. Chen arrived within minutes, rushing to Maya's side. After a quick examination, her face grew serious. We need to get her to the hospital. The stress has caused her blood pressure to spike dangerously high. Nathan lifted Maya carefully, ignoring his mother's continued protests. I'll drive. Mrs. Chen, please show my mother out. In the car, Maya gripped Nathan's hand as he navigated. Through traffic. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have stayed calm. Don't apologize, Nathan said firmly. This isn't your fault. None of it is your fault. At the hospital, they rushed Maya into the maternity ward. Dr. Chen ordered immediate medication to try to stop the contractions and lower her blood pressure. The baby's heartbeat is faster than I'd like, she told them. We need to get this under control quickly. Nathan paced the room, feeling helpless. What can I do? Just stay with me, Maya said softly. Please. Hours passed. The medication slowly began to work, but Dr. Chen insisted on keeping Maya overnight for observation. Nathan refused to leave her side, setting up camp in the uncomfortable hospital chair. Around midnight, Maya spoke into the darkness. Your mother was right about one thing. Don't, Nathan started, but Maya continued. A baby won't magically fix what was broken between us. Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, I know, but maybe it can give us a reason to build something new, something better. I'm scared, Maya admitted. Not just about the baby, but about everything. What if we can't do this? What if we end up hurting each other again? Nathan moved his chair closer to her bed. Do you remember what you said to me the day we got married? When I was panicking about the rain ruining the outdoor ceremony? A small smile touched Maya's lips. I said we couldn't control the weather, but we could control how we faced it together. You were right then, and you're right now. We can't control everything that happens. We can't erase the past, but we can choose how we face the future. Maya's hand found his in the dark. The clock, she said suddenly. Is someone winding it? Mrs. Chen knows how important it is to you. She's taking care of it. It's strange, Maya said softly. When we were married, I used to find comfort in its chimes. Then after you left, I thought I'd never want to hear that sound again, but now? Now it feels like it's counting down to something, not just the baby, but everything. Like each chime is bringing us closer to whatever we're supposed to become. Nathan squeezed her hand gently. Whatever that is, we'll face it together, if you'll let me. Maya was quiet for so long that Nathan thought she'd fallen asleep. Then she said, "Your mother won't be the last person to disapprove. Victoria won't give up easily. The business world you've built won't understand." "Let them talk," Nathan said firmly. "I spent years caring about what everyone else thought. Look where it got me. Alone in a big empty house, surrounded by people who only cared about my money and status. I lost the one person who loved me for who I was, not what I had." "And who are you?" Maya asked softly. "The man I married? The man who left? Or someone new?" Nathan thought carefully before answering. "I'm all of them, I guess, the good and the bad. But I'm trying to be better, to be worthy of you and our daughter." The hospital machinery beeped steadily in the background, a poor substitute for their grandfather clock's comforting chimes. But as Maya's hand remained in his, Nathan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope that everything would magically be fixed, or that the past could be erased, but hope that sometimes life gives you a second chance to get things right, and this time, he wouldn't let it slip away. After the incident with Eleanor, Maya's recovery in the hospital lasted 3 days. When they finally returned home, the house felt different, as if the crisis had somehow changed the energy within its walls. The grandfather clock's steady ticking welcomed them back, its familiar sound more comforting than ever. "I've been thinking," Maya said one morning, a week after their return. She sat in her usual spot by the window, watching rain trace patterns on the glass. "I want to invite my sister Rachel to visit." Nathan looked up from his laptop, where he'd been working from the living room to stay close to Maya. "Of course. It's your home too." Maya gave him a look. "Rachel wasn't exactly kind about you after the divorce." "I deserved it," Nathan said simply. "She was protecting you. She might not be civil. Then she and my mother will have something in common." Nathan's attempt at humor earned him a small smile from Maya. Rachel arrived the next day, a whirlwind of protective energy and barely contained hostility. She looked exactly as Nathan remembered. Maya's features, but sharper, harder, with none of Maya's natural softness. "So this is where you're keeping her," Rachel said, looking around the elegant living room. "Nice cage." "Rachel," Maya warned. "Don't start." "Why not? He abandoned you, Maya. Left you alone when you were at your lowest. Now suddenly he's playing the devoted father, the caring ex-husband?" Nathan stayed quiet, letting Rachel vent her anger. He deserved it, after all. "It's not that simple," Maya said softly. "Things have changed." "Have they?" Rachel challenged. "Or is he just trying to protect his image? I saw the news, about the Thompson deal falling through, about his company's stock dropping." "That's enough." Maya's voice was firm. "Nathan has proven himself these past weeks. He's been here every day putting me and the baby first." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "I'm the one who was there when he left you. I'm the one who held you while you cried yourself to sleep. I'm the one who helped you move into that tiny apartment because you were too proud to take his money." The grandfather clock chimed 10, its sound filling the tense silence that followed Rachel's words. "You're right," Nathan said quietly. "You were there when I wasn't. I can never make up for that, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." "Until it gets hard again?" Rachel shot back. "Until your precious business world needs you more than they do." "I already chose them over my business world," Nathan replied. "Ask my mother, ask Victoria, ask the Thompson family. I've burned every bridge I spent years building, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." Rachel looked at Maya. "And you believe him?" Maya's hand went to her stomach, a gesture that still made Nathan's heart skip. "I believe he's trying. That's all any of us can do." The baby chose that moment to kick, hard enough that Maya winced. Rachel was at her side instantly, concerned. "I'm fine," Maya assured her. "Your niece is just very active today." "Niece?" Rachel's voice softened. "It's a girl." Maya nodded, then looked at Nathan. "Would you give us a minute?" Nathan understood. The sisters needed time alone. "I'll be in my office if you need me." As he headed upstairs, he heard Rachel's voice break. "I've been so worried about you, Maya. When you told me about the baby..." Nathan closed his office door, giving them privacy. He tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting to the conversation downstairs, to all the pain he'd caused, not just to Maya but to everyone who loved her. Hours passed. The grandfather clock chimed noon, then 1, then 2. Finally, there was a knock at his office door. "Come in," he called, expecting Mrs. Chen with lunch. It was Rachel. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, looking less fierce than she had earlier. "Maya's napping," she said. "The doctor says she needs lots of rest. I know, I've been reading everything I can about high-risk pregnancies." Rachel sat in one of the visitor chairs. "Maya told me about what happened with your mother, about how you chose them over your family legacy." "It wasn't a hard choice," Nathan said honestly. "Not this time." "This time," Rachel repeated. "But what about next time? What happens when the baby comes and things get really hard? When you're both exhausted and arguing about diapers and feeding schedules? Then we'll figure it out together, if Maya lets me." Rachel studied him for a long moment. "You know what the hardest part was? After you left." Nathan shook his head. Watching Maya blame herself, she thought she wasn't enough, that if she'd been better, more sophisticated, more like the women in your world, you wouldn't have left. Nathan felt sick. She was always enough. More than enough. I was the one who wasn't enough for her. "Maya says you've changed." Rachel's voice was softer now. "She says you're not the same man who left. I'm trying to be better." "Trying isn't always enough." "No," Nathan agreed. "But it's a start." He took a deep breath. "Rachel, I know I hurt Maya in ways I can never fully make right, but I love her. I never stopped loving her, even when I was too blind to see it. And I love our daughter even though I haven't met her yet." Rachel stood up. "Maya wants to name her Lily, after our grandmother." Nathan felt tears prick his eyes. Maya had talked about that name during their marriage, dreaming of their future children. "It's perfect," he managed to say. "I'm staying for a week," Rachel announced, "to help with Maya and to watch you. You're welcome as long as you want to stay." Rachel headed for the door, then paused. "That clock, the one in the living room. Maya told me you kept it all this time. I couldn't let it go." "Why?" Nathan thought about all the moments that clock had witnessed. Their first kiss in the old house, their quiet Sunday mornings, their arguments and reconciliations. "Because every time it chimed, it reminded me of who I used to be, who we used to be, before I let money and status change me." Rachel nodded. Slowly, Maya said something similar. She said hearing it again feels like time is giving you both another chance. After Rachel left, Nathan sat in his office listening to the distant sound of the grandfather clock marking the hours. Another chance, not to recreate what was lost, but to build something new, something stronger. Downstairs, he heard Maya and Rachel laughing about something. The sound drifted up to his office like music, sweeter than any business deal he'd ever closed. The grandfather clock struck 3, and Nathan smiled. Each chime was indeed a countdown, not just to their daughter's birth, but to whatever future they would build together. And this time he would make sure that future was built on love, not ambition, on family, not fortune. He pulled out his phone and cancelled his membership at the exclusive country club where he'd spent so many hours networking. He wouldn't need it anymore. His real life, his real future, was downstairs, marked by the steady ticking of a clock that had never given up on them, even when they'd given up on each other. Rachel's week-long visit stretched into 2, then 3. The tension in the house had eased considerably, though Rachel still watched Nathan like a hawk. But everything changed on a stormy Tuesday night, when the power went out across the entire neighborhood. "The backup generator should kick in," Nathan said, reaching for the flashlight he kept in his desk drawer. But the emergency lights remained dark. Maya sat in her usual spot, illuminated only by occasional flashes of lightning. "Nathan!" The clock stopped. The silence where the grandfather clock's ticking should have been felt wrong, ominous. Then Maya gasped. "What is it?" Nathan and Rachel asked simultaneously, rushing to her side. "Contractions," Maya said, her voice tight with pain. "Strong ones." Nathan's blood ran cold. "It's too early. She's not due for another 6 weeks." "I'll call Dr. Chen," Rachel said, pulling out her phone. "No signal." "The landline," Nathan suggested, but the phones were dead too. Lightning flashed again, followed immediately by deafening thunder. The storm was directly overhead. "We need to get her to the hospital," Rachel insisted. "The roads are flooding," Mrs. Chen called from the window. "The storm drain on Miller Street has overflowed." Maya squeezed Nathan's hand as another contraction hit. "They're getting closer together." Nathan made a decision. "I'm calling Jake." "Your helicopter pilot?" Rachel asked incredulously. "In this storm, he's the best pilot in the state, and he owes me his life after I kept him on payroll during his recovery last year." Nathan used his satellite phone, the one he kept for business emergencies, to make the call. Jake answered on the first ring. "I know it's bad out there," Nathan said before Jake could speak, "but I need you. Maya's in labor." There was a pause, then, "Give me 20 minutes to get to the helipad. If there's any way to fly in this, I'll find it." Those 20 minutes were the longest of Nathan's life. Maya's contractions were now 5 minutes apart, and her face was pale with pain. "Talk to me," she whispered between contractions. "Distract me. Remember our first date," Nathan said, holding her hand. "When I tried to impress you with that fancy French restaurant?" Maya managed a small smile. "And I told you I'd rather have pizza. You said life was too short for food you couldn't pronounce." Nathan brushed her hair back from her forehead. "That's when I knew you were different from anyone I'd ever met." "Different wasn't always good," Maya said softly. "At least, not according to your mother. My mother was wrong about everything that mattered." Another contraction hit, stronger than before. Maya cried out, squeezing Nathan's hand. "Where's that damn helicopter?" Rachel demanded, pacing by the window. As if in answer, they heard the distant thump of rotor blades. Jake's voice crackled over the satellite phone. "I can't land at the house. Trees are too wild in this wind. Can you get to the country club? The golf course gives me enough clearance." "The country club's only 10 minutes away," Nathan said. "We can make it." Getting Maya to the car was a challenge. The wind was so strong it nearly knocked Rachel off her feet. Rain pounded sideways, soaking them despite the umbrellas Mrs. Chen held over them. Nathan drove as carefully as he could through the flooded streets, using his SUV's high clearance to forge through deep puddles. Maya sat in the back seat with Rachel, timing contractions that were now 4 minutes apart. "Almost there," Nathan assured them, turning onto the country club's long driveway. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the empty parking lot. Then Maya screamed. "Her water broke," Rachel announced from the back seat. "Nathan, hurry!" They could see the helicopter's lights now, a beacon in the storm. Jake had managed to land on the 9th hole, the chopper's blades whipping up sheets of rain. Nathan carried Maya from the car, fighting against the wind. Rachel ran ahead to help Jake prep the helicopter for immediate takeoff. Halfway across the golf course, Maya stopped him. "Nathan, wait. We can't wait, Maya. We need to get you to the hospital. Listen to me." Maya's voice was urgent. "If something happens, nothing's going to happen. If something happens," she insisted, "I need you to know I forgive you for everything." Nathan's heart clenched. "Maya, and I love you. I never stopped, even when I wanted to." Before Nathan could respond, another contraction hit. This one was different. Maya's whole body went rigid with pain. "Something's wrong," she gasped. Jake appeared beside them with a stretcher. They got Maya loaded into the helicopter, Rachel climbing in beside her. Nathan had never been so grateful for his pilot's medical training. Jake had served as a medic in the military before becoming a civilian pilot. Blood pressures high. Jake shouted over the roar of the engines, "We need to move fast." The flight to the hospital was a blur. Nathan held Maya's hand as Jake pushed the helicopter to its limits, fighting through the storm. Rachel kept track of the contractions while monitoring Maya's breathing. They landed on the hospital's helipad just as Maya's condition deteriorated rapidly. "Baby's in distress," Dr. Chen announced as soon as they rushed Maya into the emergency room. "We need to do an emergency C-section." "Nathan," Maya called weakly as they started to wheel her away. He leaned down close to hear her. "The clock," she whispered. "Promise me you'll keep it ticking, no matter what happens." "You'll hear it tick again," Nathan promised, his voice breaking. "Both of you will, I swear it." The last thing he saw, before they took her through the operating room doors, was Maya's hand resting protectively over their unborn daughter. Rachel found him pacing in the waiting room an hour later. "Any news?" Nathan shook his head. His clothes were still soaked from the storm, but he couldn't bring himself to care. "She's strong," Rachel said quietly. "Stronger than anyone knows." "I can't lose them," Nathan whispered. "Either of them." Rachel took his hand, the first time she'd willingly touched him since arriving. "Then don't. Fight for them, like you should have done before." The storm raged on outside, but in the hospital waiting room, Nathan and Rachel sat in silence, holding on to each other and hope. Somewhere in that hospital, Maya was fighting for her life and their daughters, and somewhere back at the house, a grandfather clock sat silent, waiting to tick again. Nathan closed his eyes and prayed, not to God, whom he'd largely ignored, in his pursuit of wealth, but to time itself. Time which he'd wasted so carelessly before, but which now seemed more precious than all the money in the world. "Please," he whispered, "please give us more time." The storm outside had finally begun to calm, but the storm in Nathan's heart raged on. 3 hours had passed since they'd taken Maya into surgery, and still no word. Rachel had fallen into an uneasy sleep in the waiting room chair, but Nathan couldn't rest. The elevator doors opened, and Nathan looked up hopefully. Instead of Dr. Chen, he saw his mother. Eleanor Sterling stood in the doorway, her usual perfect appearance slightly disheveled. "I heard about the emergency airlift from the country club. Why didn't you call me?" "I was a little busy trying to save my family," Nathan said tiredly. Eleanor flinched at the word family. She looked around the waiting room, taking in Rachel's sleeping form and the signs of their ordeal, their clothes still damp from the storm, the empty coffee cups scattered around. "Is she—" Eleanor hesitated. "Is Maya—" "We don't know." Nathan's voice cracked. "The baby was in distress. They had to do an emergency C-section." Eleanor sat down beside her son, surprising him by taking his hand. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about what you said. About how everything I did was for the Sterling name, not for you. Mother, I can't do this right now." "Please," Eleanor said, "let me finish." She took a deep breath. "You were right. I was so focused on maintaining our social position that I forgot what really mattered. I forgot that the Sterling name means nothing if the Sterling family is broken." Nathan looked at his mother, really looked at her, and saw something he'd never noticed before. Fear. Fear of losing him. Fear of being wrong. Fear of change. "I was wrong about Maya," Eleanor continued. "I saw her background, her simple ways, and I thought she wasn't good enough for you. But she was the only one who ever loved you for yourself, not your money or your position. And Eleanor's voice wavered. "I almost cost you that love. Twice." Before Nathan could respond, Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway. Nathan jumped to his feet, his heart pounding. "Mr. Sterling?" Dr. Chen's face was serious. "Would you like to meet your daughter?" The world stopped. They're both okay," Dr. Chen smiled. "It was touch and go for a while. Your daughter's small, just over 4 pounds, but she's fighting. And Maya's strong. She's in recovery. Now." Rachel had woken up and was crying quietly. Eleanor stood frozen, uncertain. "Can I see them?" Nathan asked. "Maya's still sedated, but you can see the baby. She's in the NICU." Nathan followed Dr. Chen through the hospital corridors, his mother and Rachel close behind. At the NICU entrance, they had to don sterile gowns and masks. And then Nathan saw her. She was tiny, so impossibly tiny in her incubator. Tubes and wires monitored her vital signs, but all Nathan could see was her face. Maya's nose, his chin, perfect little fingers curled into fists. "Lily," he whispered, pressing his hand against the incubator's glass. "Hello, Lily." "She's beautiful," Eleanor said softly. She'd come up beside him, tears in her eyes. "She looks just like you did when you were born. So small, but so determined." "She's a fighter," Rachel added, her voice thick with emotion. "Like her mother." A nurse approached them. "Would you like to touch her? You can put your hand through." "Here." Nathan nodded, unable to speak. The nurse showed him how to put his hand through the incubator's port. When his finger touched Lily's tiny hand, she gripped it reflexively. "That's it, little one," the nurse encouraged. "Show your daddy how strong you are." Nathan felt tears rolling down his face, but he didn't care. In that moment, nothing existed except his daughter's tiny hand holding his finger. "Mr. Sterling?" Another nurse appeared. "Maya's awake. She's asking for you." Nathan looked reluctantly at Lily. "Go," Rachel said. "I'll stay with her. She won't be alone for a second." "I'll stay too," Eleanor added. When Rachel looked at her suspiciously, she said, "If you'll let me, I'd like to get to know my granddaughter." Nathan hurried to Maya's room in the recovery wing. She lay pale against the white sheets, but her eyes were open. "Nathan," her voice was weak. "I'm here." He took her hand, kissing it gently. "I'm right here, Lily." The fear in her voice broke his heart. "She's beautiful," he assured her. "So beautiful, Maya. She's small, but she's strong, just like her mother." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "I was so scared when everything started happening so fast." "I know, but you did it. You both did it." "I meant what I said," Maya whispered. "Before the surgery. About forgiving you. About loving you." Nathan's heart soared, but he kept his voice steady. "I love you too. I never stopped. Even when I was too blind to see it, too caught up in what everyone else wanted me to be. Your mother is currently bonding with Rachel over our daughters." "Incubator?" Maya's eyes widened. "What?" Nathan smiled. Apparently, nearly losing your only son and granddaughter in one night can change a person's perspective. Nathan, Maya's voice was hesitant. When can I see her? As soon as you're strong enough to sit up. Dr. Chen said maybe tomorrow morning. Maya nodded, fighting to keep her eyes open. The medications were pulling her back toward sleep. Rest, Nathan said softly. I'll stay right here. Promise? I promise. No more running away. No more putting anything before you and Lily. Maya's eyes closed, but she was smiling slightly. The clock, she murmured, half asleep. Did anyone wind it? Mrs. Chen texted. The power's back on, and the first thing she did was wind the clock. Nathan squeezed her hand gently. It's ticking away, counting the minutes until we can bring you both home. Maya drifted off to sleep, her face peaceful for the first time in hours. Nathan sat beside her bed, holding her hand, listening to the steady beep of her heart monitor. It wasn't quite the same as their grandfather clocks ticking, but it was just as precious. Marking each moment, his family's hearts kept beating, kept fighting, kept loving. Outside the room, he could hear Rachel and his mother talking quietly, their earlier hostility forgotten in the face of Lily's fight for life. In the NICU, his daughter was proving with every breath that she was a sterling in the ways that really mattered. Strong, determined, unwilling to give up, willing to we. Nathan closed his eyes, finally allowing himself to feel the exhaustion of the night. But he didn't sleep. He just sat there, holding Maya's hand, grateful for every rise and fall of her chest, every beep of the monitor, every precious second chance that life had given them. Tomorrow Maya would meet their daughter. Tomorrow they would begin the journey of helping Lily grow stronger. Tomorrow they would start building their future, not the one society expected, but the one their hearts demanded. But for now, Nathan just sat and counted heartbeats, like the ticking of a beloved clock, marking time not in minutes and hours, but in love and hope and forgiveness. 1 month had passed since the stormy night that brought Lily into the world. Each day in the NICU she grew stronger, defying the odds with every breath. Maya spent every possible moment with her, and Nathan only left their side when absolutely necessary. She's gained another 2 ounces, the nurse announced proudly one morning. At this rate, she might be ready to go home next week. Maya, sitting in the rocking chair beside the incubator, looked up hopefully. Really, her breathing is strong. She's feeding well and her weight gain is steady, the nurse confirmed. Dr. Chen will make the final decision, but things are looking good. Nathan, who had been updating their family group chat with Lily's latest progress, felt his heart swell. The past month had changed everything, not just Lily's fight for life, but the relationships around her. Rachel had extended her stay indefinitely, moving into the guest house on Nathan's property. Eleanor visited daily, bringing hand-knitted blankets and tiny clothes, slowly building a bridge with Maya through their shared love for Lily. Even Victoria had sent a peace offering, her resignation from the Thompson project and a sincere letter of apology to Maya. But the biggest change was in Nathan's home itself. The cold modern mansion had transformed. The pristine white walls now held photographs, Maya's pregnancy journey, Lily's first days, family moments in the NICU. The formal living room had become a cozy family space, centered around the grandfather clock that now ticked in perfect harmony with their new life. Nathan, Maya's voice brought him back to the present. Can you take over for a bit? I need to get something from the gift shop. Of course. Nathan took Maya's place in the rocking chair. Through the incubator's port, he held Lily's tiny hand, marveling at how much stronger her grip had become. Hello, princess, he whispered. Daddy's here. Lily's eyes, Maya's eyes, looked up at him. At 1 month old, she was already mastering the art of wrapping him around her little finger. You know, he told her softly, a month ago, I thought I was going to lose everything. But instead I gained more than I ever dreamed possible. The NICU door opened, but it wasn't Maya who walked in. It was Eleanor, carrying another tiny knitted blanket. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said hesitantly. Not at all, Nathan smiled. Come meet your granddaughter's latest milestone. She gained 2 more ounces. Eleanor's face lit up. She came to stand beside them, watching Lily with genuine love in her eyes. I was so wrong, she said quietly, about everything, about Maya, about what makes a family strong. She touched the incubator gently. This little one has taught me more in 1 month than I learned in 70 years. She has that effect on people, Nathan agreed. The board called again, Eleanor said after a moment, about the CEO position. Nathan tensed. The company's board of directors had been pressuring him to step down after the Thompson deal fell apart, seeing his personal life as a liability. "I told them to shove it," Eleanor announced. Nathan looked at his mother in shock. "You what?" "I told them that if they want to fire my son for choosing his family over their precious profit margins, they'll have to fire me from the board first." Eleanor smiled wickedly. Apparently they'd forgotten that I still owned 30% of the company's shares. "Mother, it's time the Sterling name stood for something real," Eleanor said firmly. "Not just money and status, but family and love and doing what's right." Before Nathan could respond, Maya returned. She carried a small shopping bag and looked nervous. "Everything okay?" Nathan asked. Maya nodded. "I got something for Lily, for when she comes home." She pulled a small silver frame from the bag. "I thought we could put it next to the clock." Nathan looked at the frame. Inside was a family photo taken just days ago, Maya holding Lily. In the NICU, Nathan beside them, Rachel and Eleanor on either side. They were all smiling, not the practiced smiles of his old society photos, but real, joy-filled smiles. "It's perfect," he said softly. A week later, Dr. Chen signed Lily's discharge papers. After a month of fighting, growing, and proving her strength, she was finally ready to go home. Maya dressed her in a pale yellow onesie, Eleanor's latest gift, while Nathan installed the car seat for the 100th time, making sure it was perfect. Rachel and Mrs. Chen had decorated the house with welcome home banners, and even Jake the pilot had sent flowers. As they drove home, Nathan took the long route, giving Maya time to calm her nerves. She sat in the back seat with Lily, counting tiny fingers and toes over and over, as if making sure nothing had changed in the journey. When they pulled into the driveway, Maya gasped. The entire front of the house was decorated with yellow butterflies, just like the ones in Lily's nursery. "Rachel and my mother," Nathan explained. "They've been planning this all week." Inside, the grandfather clock chimed 3, its familiar sound welcoming them home. Maya carried Lily to it, tears in her eyes. "Listen, sweet girl," she whispered. "That sound meant so much to Mommy and Daddy. It saw us fall in love, fall apart, and find our way back to each other. And now it's going to watch you grow up." Nathan wrapped his arms around them both, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Welcome home," he said softly. Rachel appeared from the kitchen, followed by Eleanor and Mrs. Chen. They had prepared a small celebration, nothing like the lavish parties of Nathan's past, but perfect in its simplicity. As they gathered in the living room sharing stories and passing Lily from eager arms to eager arms, Nathan looked around at his family. Not the family society had expected him to have, not the family his younger self had thought he wanted, but the family his heart had always needed. The grandfather clock ticked steadily, marking not just time but love. Love that had been lost and found, broken and mended, tested and proven true. Love that had created Lily, who now slept peacefully in Maya's arms, unaware of how her tiny life had healed so many hearts. "Nathan," Maya called softly, "come sit with us." He joined them on the couch, putting his arm around Maya as she leaned against him. Lily stirred slightly, then settled again, one tiny hand gripping Maya's finger while the other held Nathan's. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Inside, the grandfather clock ticked on, counting not the hours until something ended, but the moments until something new began. A family bound not by expectations or obligations, but by choice and love and forgiveness. And in that moment, Nathan knew this was what he had been searching for all along. Not success or status or society's approval, but this, the sound of a beloved clock, the warmth of Maya's smile, the perfect weight of Lily in his arms, and the knowledge that sometimes what you leave behind leads you exactly where you need to be.